Alright, this is a small public service announcement from Copper Cutlass. So, some of you guys may be used to this Slick Red assembly lube, or the Lucas, the green snot. Same stuff. It's got all the good stuff that you would want. There's only one problem with it. If you let your engine sit for a long time, your lobes will look like that. The stuff runs off of the lobe. It doesn't really stick. That stuff I really like for engine bearings, or lubricate 105, I think it is, or number 5. I like that stuff for the bearing surfaces, stuff like that. On the lobes and lifters, you really want to use something that's like heavy molybdenum, like the Iski Rev Lube, or the packages of like the Gorilla Snot that Comp and Lunati give you when you buy a brand new cam. That stuff doesn't ooze off. It stays on. I really, really like the Iski Rev Lube, and I highly recommend it because it doesn't come off of the lobe. It sticks to it. If your engine sits for a long time, it will run, and I'll show you. The inside of this bag is all of that stuff. Just like you can see, it's kind of shiny in there. It's all that stuff that's just been dripping down through like the crank and stuff, and you could see it kind of dripping off of the bolts, but it stays on the bearing surfaces because obviously there's something there to keep it in there. So I really do not recommend, for this purpose of the video I did today, I did use it just to put something on there. But when I actually finalize this, I'm taking this out and I'm putting like a heavy molybdenum type assembly lube, which I think I had some out here. It's you can actually get it at O'Reilly's. It's a black little bottle. So this is moly graphite. This stuff's pretty good. It's something that is pretty thick, and it stays put. And that's the important part, is keeping that stuff where on the surfaces that you need it on that initial startup. The Iski Rev Lube is very, very similar to that. That stuff you can get at O'Reilly's. The Iski Rev Lube you probably have to order from somewhere like Jegs or Summit. So, on to the main point of this video, so it's not too long. Let you guys go. Alright guys, again here at Copper Cutlass, and I had a little bit of time to come out here because I dug out those Ford guide plates that I had mentioned to you guys that I wanted to use for my push rods. So as you guys know, this is a freshen up. I already have the push rod size figured out. We didn't really resurface much off of the heads. We just kind of milled them to square them up. Not enough to drastically change anything. You're talking about a couple thousands. Not a big deal. So when I jumped on the old internet and went to the Book of Face and asked on one of the Oldsmobile pages, I asked about a specific question. I need a 7/16 guide plate for the Oldsmobile for a 5/16 push rod. It's impossible. You can't find it. A lot of people said you can drill out the guide plates. A lot of people said you couldn't. And a lot of people said to just do the Ford rocker arm. And I'm going to tell you where everybody was kind of fucking wrong. And it's also very unique to your engine and where everything sits. So we know already going into this that I have a pretty good pattern, albeit using a Ford rocker arm. We are going to a Harlan Sharp Oldsmobile rocker arm, which it's debatable on whether or not it's just a Ford rocker arm. People have said that many times, depending on what model you get. But regardless of what the situation is, I'm going to show you guys a couple of things and problems here. So on my small block, it's a 0 deck. So on most stock engines, the piston will sit about 25 thousandths under the top of the deck where the cylinder head surface is on the engine. So we've lopped off already 25 thousandths off of the deck. And I know that because it's a 0 deck motor. And these heads were milled, I can't actually remember how much was milled off of the heads, but they're at 67 cc's if I remembered correctly. So now let's look at a couple of things here. Now you can see the laundry in the back room, in the bathroom, in the background. My wife's been doing laundry, but you can see the roller is actually kind of pretty centered, you know, on the valve tip. Now you see, as I'm mimicking height, it's pushing it away, but it's kind of pretty centered in there. And I did do a pattern on this one, and I'll show you guys what it looks like. So the pattern on there isn't too horrible. I could live with that as long as it doesn't have like a major sweep. And I can tell you guys that everybody's like, you need a thin blah 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 pattern. No, I ran the crap out of this engine with a Ford rocker arm with a little bit of a sweep. The pattern kind of looked like that. And guess what? When I had the heads freshened up, the guides were still good. That's according to Dave, because Dave, my buddy Dave, 67 Cutlass Freak, freshened up these heads as well. We put bigger valves in it, and you know, he did more porting to them. So, all right. So on to that, right? So even with this rocker arm, even though it's not tightened down, we got it sitting down there, and we went ahead. But another problem too is I'm actually bottomed out on the rocker arm stud. But that's because look at how thick this guide plate is. You know, that's almost like an 1/8 of an inch. I wouldn't exactly call that maybe like an 1/8. Maybe I'd call that like a 110, 120. But that's thick, and it's going to bring up the stem a lot. So now we're hitting on the hex of the rocker arm. Not to mention, we've ran out of thread to actually set it up for valve lash. So I'm not saying that everybody out there was wrong, but what I am saying is that when you guys ask for advice out there, take it with a grain of salt, because everybody said that the Ford rocker arm, the Ford guide plates would work, and it's for my setup, it's totally wrong. So even though I could not use guide plates on these studs, I did wedge the guide plates in there, and I tightened down the studs so that I am mimicking the thickness of the guide plate. So you can see I got a air gap there, and that is actually the thickness of the guide plate, which the thickness of the guide plate, I believe on these, is roughly about 60 thousandths. If I can find my dial calipers, I'll actually do that real fast for you guys, because it's been a while since I actually measured a set. So bear with me here. I'm going to kind of do this by myself with one hand holding a phone. So is this zeroed out? Yeah, it's kind of zeroed out. It's off by 1 thou or so, but yeah, 60. We're off by 1 thou, like I said, because I didn't zero this out. So there you go, it's 60. And the Ford one, now it's actually, you know, I eyeballed it. I said like 110, 120. We'll see how close I am. This is kind of hard to do one-handed. This is when, like, I really need my wife to help me, but I don't want to bug her. So this is actually 115. So you see we're on the 1, and we're just 1 thou past 15. And we acknowledge that we are about 1 thou off, so that's about 0.115. It's over 1/10 of an inch thick. That's huge. That's a lot. The other problem, though, so with these 7/16 studs, and even with the thickness of that guide plate, I'm actually kind of running out of threads a little bit for valve lash. So I'm going to have to try to rethread these studs, stupid as that sounds, just to get a couple of more threads out of them, because I can already tell that I'm gonna end up modifying these guide plates. I'm gonna buy some brand new carbides, and we're gonna go for it, and we're gonna see if who's right and who's wrong. And right now, the Ford guide plate crowd is absolutely losing. So we're gonna see if the ream these out with the carbide crowd is correct. So we're gonna buy a fresh carbide, and we're gonna hog these out one day at the shop. Like I mentioned in the other video, I got a new job, but I do still have some freedoms there, so I'm gonna hog those out and get this stuff ready. So our pattern actually isn't too bad. It's pretty much the same. And on this one, it's going to be even more a little off because I actually think we're sitting on the freaking, you know, we're actually sitting on the hex. So my pattern's a little off because we're bottoming out in a spot where we shouldn't. And on this one, well, I don't have a guide plate, so it's going to do this and that, so it's going to be a little inconclusive. But what I will say is that for shits and grins, I'm going to go ahead and give this a whirl while I'm with you guys here, because this is a topic that, you know, is actually important. So I'm going to clean this off. Again, I got a little bit of that ATF, which is good. I have to find my Sharpie, which is over here. Now if I can, there we go, you see, kick the cap off. Just remind me, guys, where that went. So we're going to go ahead and Sharpie this little guy in. You know, we're going to be like Bob Ross. No mistakes here, just pretty little birds. Oh, wait, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up my cap, do this, put my marker in a safe spot on the engine like always. So then I'm going to go ahead and screw this down. And I'm not going to factor in valve lash on this one. I'm just going to tighten it down until it kind of snugs up. This one actually does go all the way down. Again, the thread length on these studs is not exact, so we know we're going to be snug there. So we're going to kind of there we go. It moved a little bit, so I hope that it didn't really screw it up. We'll see what it looks like, because again, I'm actually looking through my camera as I'm doing this. I'm not even like using a selfie stick or something. So you can see our pattern is not too bad. We're close to center. That main black mark is the pattern that's our actual pattern. The main black mark right there. It's pretty centered. That's pretty good. You don't have to be dead nut center, but you don't want a big sweep, because what happens when you have a big sweep, you're actually pushing the valve tip around and you'll knock out the guides over time. We had a minimal sweep with our Ford rocker arms, and that wasn't that big of a deal. Obviously, we had these freshened up. The engine's got almost 200 passes on it, or had almost 200 passes on it. Bunch of street miles, a lot of beating on it, and guides were good. So that means that the Ford rocker arms are good. And I might add, for the guys that are on the budget and you guys want to use a good Ford rocker arm, the Pro Comp or Speedmaster 302 rocker arms are what I ran for years, and these are the stainless ones. These are heavy. Only problem with the heavy ones is that they're going to add a lot of weight to the stud. It will affect a little bit of how fast the engine snaps, as you are adding some resistance to the overall rotation of the engine. And again, I suspect that with this heavy rocker arm and with the old puny studs that I used to run, I suspect that these rocker arms were like actually moving around, and I didn't have a lot of very good valve train stability. So now with the 7/16 stud, the Harlan Sharps, I'm going to go ahead and get a girdle for it, because you're supposed to, you know, through valve train stability, you're supposed to gain horsepower. That's what I've been told, and that is the theory. And we're going to go ahead and just, the valve train girdle's like $200 at this point. We're just going to do it. But again, this stuff is going to take a little bit of time, because again, with my job change, I have to kind of get back into a different routine. But not only that, I'm going on vacation at the beginning of March, and February is a short month, so I don't know what I am going to be able to get. Obviously, I have some items that I picked up. Big shout out to John Harold Jr., who got me these US made, I believe they are US made, freeze plugs for my engine. He got me all the correct ones. He also gave me this idle solenoid for free for track shenanigans. We're gonna try that out for a little bit of a tiny bit of a launch aid, not a big one. And yeah, guys, stick around. I told you guys I'm still waiting on gaskets. My buddy has the gaskets that are half the thickness of your standard gaskets. So these gaskets here are actually 60 thou. I got 30 thou, and I wish I could show you guys how much bigger these ports are. These are big block ports, and so I have a huge lip down here that's almost 1/8 of an inch, but we raised the roof. So really, realistically, you want it here. There's a big lip there. The roof has been raised quite a bit, and that should give us quite a bit of improvement as well in airflow, as now we have a bigger, straighter shot into the runner. Like the hardcore guys will fill the floor, raise the roof, and then you'll have a straight shot down into the valve, which improves airflow greatly. But the subject of this topic here was to debunk this, because this is actually something I asked on one of the Oldsmobile specific groups. And so for my particular setup, the Ford guide plates are absolutely wrong all across the board. Now, the only thing I will say is that my pads were never milled, and usually you mill the pads for the thickness of the guide plate and blah blah blah, but there's water under here, so you can only go so much, I believe, before you run into issues. And I don't think that even 60 thou would help in that situation. Maybe it would. It's like half the thickness almost of those. Those are 115. So if I was to lop off 60 thou off the pads, it might put us closer to where this is at. And obviously here we have all kinds of room between the hex. I wish I could get a better shot, but we have all kinds of room between the hex and the body of the, as you can see right there, there's the two-lipped area of the rocker arm stud. We got a lot of room there. So I probably made this way longer than it needed to be, but I hope this helps somebody out there. There's a lot of little things that add up as you're building an engine. And again, we didn't mill the pads, so the Ford guide plates will not work on an unmilled pad. They might work if you knock them down 60. I don't know how far down you can go on this pad though, but because I believe there's water jackets underneath here. There's water underneath here, I believe. Somebody can correct me on that. But the whole thing is that I need to keep the thin guide plate to keep clearance at the hex to be and then not only that, I actually have to try to get a couple of more threads. So I'm going to have to thread the studs because I'm running out of room for a lash. This one's fine, this one's not, so I'm just going to add a couple threads to every single stud and go from there. So at least I'm doing something, showing you guys, and this thing will be ready to go in no time. Again, we're in no rush. We still got like 3 solid months of crappy weather in the Midwest, so at this point, share, like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram as Copper Cutlass. There's going to be a lot more coming up. Once we port the manifold, I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to line up the gaskets to the ports and everything, and we'll show you guys how I do all that. So I'll let you guys go. Bye.